Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm ffinlo Costain. Today's headlines: young farmers feel neglected and unrepresented by EU farm lobby group Copa-Cogeca. Financial models on climate risk are inadequate and implausible. And cattle ranching doesn't have to destroy the Amazon rainforest. Full stories at 8.9.com. A new investigation by Lighthouse Reports has targeted the powerful European farming lobby group Copa-Cogeca, which they say is losing legitimacy, leaving small farmers and young farmers feeling neglected and unrepresented by Copa-Cogeca's opposition to agroecological reforms in Brussels. Lei Win is a co-author of the Lighthouse Reports investigation. I asked her to tell me why Copa-Cogeca is so important.
So Copa-Cogeca is the oldest, biggest, and most powerful farm lobby group in the European Union. They claim that they represent more than 22 million farmers and their families. And what that means is that politicians, other lobby groups and bureaucrats listen to them and take what they say as what farmers want and need. And this is important because the single largest budget item in the EU is the system of subsidies for farmers known as the Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP. It amounts to about a third of the EU budget. So Lighthouse Report thought that it's really crucial to find out what Copa-Cogeca is and whether their claim to power is legitimate.
So if Copa-Cogeca is essentially the National Farmers Union for the European Union, why was Lighthouse Reports investigating it? I mean, I'm imagining you don't investigate everybody. So what was it in particular about Copa-Cogeca that made you want to look into it? And what did you find out?
So, ffinlo, one of the missions for the Lighthouse Reports Food Systems Newsroom was to look into the structural inequalities and power imbalances that are inherent in food and farming today, which is why last year, we investigated whether excessive speculation was contributing to food price inflation. And we even, spoke about that last year as well with you. This year, we've published investigations on, the use of pesticides banned in the EU in third world countries. We've also looked at how corporate consolidation and monopolies are affecting small scale farmers. So looking into Copa-Cogeca, who, like I said, is the biggest and most powerful farming lobby group in the EU, is natural thing to do, which brought us to our findings, which show that Copa-Cogeca has a lot of power and sway in Brussels, but they mostly represent the interests of big, large-scale, industrial, intensive farming, farming groups and cooperatives, and not the small and medium-sized farmers that actually make up the bulk of European agriculture. We found that the membership numbers are either opaque, unavailable, or unreliable. It is nowhere near 22 million. A lot of the small farmers and young farmers that we spoke to feel neglected, unrepresented, and disagreed with Copa-Cogeca's positions in Brussels. And that includes being one of the biggest spoilers of efforts to make European farming more sustainable. And by that, I mean, they fought against a lot of environmental provisions under the CAP, and also the farm to fork strategy, which is one of the cornerstones of the EU Green Deal, right? What that means in practice is that they have been fighting efforts to restore degraded natural areas, to halve pesticide use, and to link farm subsidies to environmental outcomes.
Now, there are two issues that we sort of need to get into there. And the first is membership. So does it matter that Copa-Cogeca's membership numbers are a bit inflated when, after all, farmers and farm businesses do need to be represented at European Union level?
Absolutely, ffinlo. I absolutely agree with you that farmers and their representatives definitely need a seat at the table at the European level in Brussels. Farming is one of the most important professions there is, right? But that is also exactly why it does matter that Copa-Cogeca is only representing a small subset of farmers and not all farmers, because it affects the kind of policies that are being implemented, which are only benefiting the few, not the many, right? Because it means effectively that they're not the voices of farmers, only a small set of farmers. And this is especially worrying because European farming is in crisis. We have lost 3 million farmers in 10 years. That's a rate of 800 a day. And they're not being replaced because, the average age of a European farmer these days is 57. And that's even before, Russia's invasion of Ukraine put pressure on input prices. and all these multiple extreme weather events that Europe has been experiencing in the past couple of years, right? All the droughts, the wildfires, the floods, the hailstorms, all of that have really affected agriculture, and scientists have said very explicitly and clearly that things are likely to get worse, which means farming needs to adapt. And just very, very briefly, last point, I want to quote Olivier de Schutter here, who is a former special rapporteur on the right to food and chair of the international panel of experts on sustainable food systems. We interviewed him and he said that change is inevitable, right? And that Copa-Cogeca can help in this transition to help farmers to gain from being part of the change. But our investigation shows that that is not what they are doing.
So there's a challenge there in terms of Copa-Cogeca overinflating the power base, I suppose, that it has, which then potentially gives it an outsized lobbying capacity within Brussels. But if Copa-Cogeca is just representing that sort of large-scale, high-input, perhaps more industrial form of agriculture, and we're looking for this transition, then who is it that's representing the interests of smaller-scale farmers and those producing already for agroecological supply chains?
So there are other groups like the La Via Campesina movement, there's the Slow Food Network and IFO, which represent organic farmers. And they do have presences in Brussels, but they are way, way smaller than Copa-Cogeca. But more importantly, they have nowhere near as close a relationship with the decision makers. And by this, I mean the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council, as Copa-Cogeca does. Look, before every Agri-Fish Council meeting, and this is the meeting of agricultural ministers in the European Union, right? Copa-Cogeca is the only group that gets to meet and talk to the presidency. No other group has that access. Of course, there are also millions of independent farmers who are not a part of any of these groups that we're talking about today, because I mean, farmers are busy, right? And the ones who have the access and resources to go to Brussels and lobby are often not the ones who need help the most. And I think it's really important that policymakers remember that.
That was Lei Win from Lighthouse Reports. More about this and our other headline news on our website, 8.9.com. That's all for now. We're back next week. Thanks for watching.